Wow. Aren't those pretty towers? You see, I was actually going to go somewhere else to record this, but then I used the Book of Binding because I was in the middle of nowhere with this character because the last time I played her, I was trying to walk around the order camp and wave to people, but I was kind of just in the middle of an RVR zone with and had quite a distance to go to get to anywhere, so I just used the Book of Binding, and now I'm back here. Oh, that's also really pretty, actually. Oh, look at the tree. The tree is like magic on fire. Because if a tree was actually on fire, it wouldn't look like that. So it must be magic on fire. That's really cool. How are you guys doing today? I decided that I wanted to do a couple of videos on some different topics. But I had been doing a bunch of videos with Yamina. And I love Yamina. I give her hugs every night. Because she's just such a great lady and such a big badass, as you know. But I decided I wanted to record a lady with Jedi because I hadn't played her in a little while because I've basically mostly just been playing Yamina. She's just become my favorite, and I have this backstory for her, and I just really like playing her, you know. But and the thing that's funny is the subject of today's video will make it seem like Yamina would be a better choice, but I just decided it had been such a while since I'd played Jedi that I wanted to just switch it up, go do something different, run around the Dark Elf lands for a little bit. I will also be honest with you. Part of the reason I'm reluctant to put too much time into other characters is A, the Yamina just looks cool, her armor, and I really like the Knights of the Blazing Sun. But B, this was the other character I really liked, but I just was looking at the higher level equipment, and it gets very spiky very fast. And, I like it well enough, but it's still just like, kind of weird. But no, I figured it might be a bit of fun to see Janabai. Hey, look, she's waving at you. Isn't that great? She's wishing you many good things across your day. Unlike those other Dark Elves over there who are probably wishing to stab. But that's okay, because they're not going to stab, because Janabai will defend you. Oh, and real quick before I get into the actual subject of the video, I know I'm already babbling way too much, but so the name Janabai actually comes from a Hindu poet from the 14th century, and she's really neat. You should look her up. She has all kinds of poems, but she was like a devotee of Vishnu, but I think it's in the aspect of Vibhuti. Vibhuti, I think that's how you say. I'm not 100% sure, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, just kind of an interesting historical person. You can look her up and read some different things about her, and she's kind of today admired as a saint. But where we're gonna go somewhere different to talk, because I am going to go to the Dwarven Greenskin lands, because that's the fun area for me. And here, we're going to go to the March Madness area. Just because why not? There's a lot of plants and stuff there, and that's kind of neat. I was trying to think of a place I could go to talk about this person, because I want to talk about Myrmidia. She's one of my favorite Empire goddesses. She is also one of my favorite goddesses from Telia and, Estilia and all this other fun places, But she's mostly, I mostly know her from her participation in the Empire stuff. And that might also be why you're like, now, wait a minute, why didn't you do the Night of the Blazing Sun lady? Because she would have, that's like her goddess and stuff like that. It's like, well, yeah, I know that. Gah. But you see, the main reason is, like I said, I wanted to just do something a little different. And I want to talk about Myrmidia because I just think that she's really neat and interesting. I also want to do a video about Sigmar in the near future, but I think I'm actually going to try and level up a warrior priest a little bit so that I can have a warrior priest do the posing in the video and stuff like that, because, Janabai, you like knowledge and things, right? Wait, let's do it. Oh, there's not a read command? Is there a book command? There's not a book command. Drink. There, she's done her Slurpee. She has the energy for the rest of the video now, at the very least. But Myrmidia is a really interesting goddess. She's based, at least partially, on Athena, and there are some hints, and the stuff I was reading suggested that it might also be a little bit on Aphrodite, but I don't know as much about Aphrodite. I know a little bit about Athena, and okay, that's a little interesting. Just kind of floating there. But I know a little bit about Athena. And Athena, for those of you who don't know, she is the Greek, but also kind of Greco-Roman. She had some worshippers in Rome, but she's basically the goddess of like wartime, wisdom, like planning, and there's a lot of other things that she's into. But this is kind of where we draw one of the big connections here. And I I printed out some stuff that I was going to read. So this is from the Journals of Lord Carl Reichard Goliner, second Grand Master of the Knights Panther. And what am I? I'm just gonna read a little bit of this. There's a big quote here. The day I was taken by Signor Albarno to the High Temple of Myrmidia in Margarita. In Magrita, not Margarita. It is a sight that I shall never forget. In particular, it was impossibly large. It has I'm doing terrible here. It has impossibly large, unsupported domes. When I inquired as to the force that kept them from falling, the amused reply was simply science. I remained unconvinced and believed there is some magical component in their construction. I received a tour of a wondrous place and myths associated with each carving. Carving, frieze, and window were explained to me. One story stood is particularly unexpected, so I will recount it here. Myrmidia once chose to walk the earth as a powerless mortal. At this point, she, like her sister Shalia, was a pacifist. When still a girl, her parents died, so Myrmidia went to live with her aunt and uncle, who were farmers and very poor. They hated the girl and took any opportunity to spite her, forcing her to work from dawn till dusk. Eventually, when she came of age, they gifted her to a local lord, hoping he would be grateful and ease their taxes. The lord was not a kind master, and the mortal goddess was subject to many indignities. Eventually, unwilling to accept the injustice any longer, Myrmidia, enraged, rose up and took a ceremonial spear from the lord's collection, thrusting it into his abdomen. Myrmidia was changed forever, and from that day forward, she never walked again without a spear, a weapon that came to symbolize her future struggles. So right off the bat there, you have some very interesting things. So, we learned that she's a sister of Shalia. And Shalia, for those of you who don't know, she is a goddess, the classic pantheon in the old world of healing and I believe divination as well, but mostly healing. She's like considered a very merciful goddess, and she's also a pacifist. And her order goes around the old world and they heal people for, sometimes for coin, but usually for free. And they're like really charitable and really nice, which is part of the reason I like them. But Myrmidia is kind of interesting because she becomes a warrior goddess. She becomes a goddess of war and struggle, and very particularly justice. And the thing that I find interesting here is that they say her mortal mother and father died. But if you actually know a little bit about the classic pantheon in the old world, you'll know that her mother and father are actually the same mother and father as Shalia, as you would expect, which would be Mor and Verena. Verena is another goddess that I'm going to do a video on at some point, and Mor as well, because I actually find all of them very cool and interesting. But basically, you get the whole main story there. I also think it's funny that, as much as I love the Empire, I always find it funny that a lot of them are very silly. Like, when you say science is holding up those domes, nah, man, that's magic. Look. Game recognized game. I recognize magic. But there's also a short bit in one of the Gotrek and Felix stories where they meet a doctor, and Felix is like astonished because this guy went to Arabia, I'm sorry, and he learned a bunch of like medical practices and things like that. So what was really funny about it was that he was like shocked and it's like, you don't use leeches or the four humors? Oh my lord, I can't trust you as a doctor. But then he heals him anyway. It's very funny. And one of the other things that we're going to point out here is she rewards those who fight their wars with honor. She endorses the pursuit of wisdom in warfare and inspires commanders with tactical brilliance on the battlefield and individual fighters with quick-witted swordsplay. And that's from the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, Up in Arms. And You know, I thought this was very interesting because, there are a lot of gods in the old world that are kind of harsh or kind of dicks. Like Tall is kind of cool, but he's also kind of a dick, as an example. I mean, there's also like the chaos gods and all these other things, but this is a lady who's reinforcing you to fight for justice and to fight for honor and to fight for the good things, protecting civilization and protecting the people. And I really like that. Um, Statues of Myrmidia portray her as a woman in the prime of youth, standing tall, head held high, clad in the traditional panoply of classical Remus. Or Remus, I guess is that what it would actually be. A plumed helmet and muscled cuirass of bronze. She leans on a spear that bears. Leans on a spear and bears a shield emblazoned with an eagle, which features heavily in the cult of Myrmidia, a symbol of her keen eyesight and broad view in battle, an animal some legends say she can transform into. Something that's interesting there is that there is some borrowing from the image of Athena. Athena, for instance, is almost always depicted as a young woman with a big plumed helmet. Although she doesn't normally wear a cuirass, she normally is wearing like a long flowing robe, but she also has a spear and often a shield as well. One of the things that I find very interesting here, though, is that with Athena, there is a powerful connection to owls. To wait, I just want to see something here. There's no command for flat. What about? I laugh heartily because I couldn't flap. But there is a lot of imagery with owls. Athena is heavily associated with owls. She's sometimes called the gray-eyed goddess. So it's kind of interesting. Um, I don't know of any myths where Athena can turn into an owl. That might be a thing. I'm not 100%. But the idea that Myrmidia is like really heavily associated with the eagle is also interesting because like it almost in a sense kind of reminds me of putting a little bit of a Germanic flair onto it, because Germany has a lot of symbolism like throughout the ages, like especially like the Holy Roman Empire with like eagles and things like that, and so does the Roman Empire. So it's kind of interesting to see that there. But she has this cool eagle power. And I also find it interesting that she's always predicted or kind of presented as like a young woman, because this is like usually when you hear about like tales of wisdom and stuff like that, you tend to think older folks, but she's very particularly a young woman, and I very much like that. She's also often associated with lions, and one of the animals often rests at her feet, showing how she can subdue even the strongest foe with her feats of arms. A stylized lion head with a giant, one second, mane looks quite similar to her symbol as the sun, often depicted with the female face smiling benevolently upon it. She is known for her calm, honorable approach to all matters, and her clerics do what they can to emulate this. So right off the bat, we have this character that's very much, if I was going to cut it out of things, very much about control. She's very much like, actually kind of, Genevieve looks a little bit like her now that, well, more spiky, but still, like very much about control. And she's very much about the, like using your head and wisdom and like learning and science and things like that. And I found that deeply appealing. I also find the idea of like warrior clerics going out there to like fight and defend like the weak in society incredibly appealing. That's like stuff I want to do. Well, maybe not like with an actual sword, mind you. Maybe with hugs. Maybe with hugs and a sword. I think that like, is that a contradict? Nah, it's fine. It's fine. But no, she's a very interesting goddess in that way, and I think she has more basis in like the southern realms of the empire, because on the southern end, if you go south of the empire, you connect to Telia and you also connect to Estelia, and that's where like the classic pantheon is most heavily worshipped. And I mean, you do see the classic pantheon gods do have prevalence in the empire overall. Like Mor is, for instance, the classic god and is the god of death, like in the empire. So that's very interesting to me. she also wants us to fight very specifically for those who can't fight. She wants us to, like, you know, not to rush into battle and always, like, you know, always be like, haha, I gotta smack something. Like, a lot of warrior gods in Warhammer are very much like kind of primal, and they're always like kind of like taking the axe and running forward and rah 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 rah. Or even Sigmar, even though Sigmar is pretty cool, and you can have, there's a lot of different aspects of Sigmar. A lot of his priests and, you know, like the zealot type people, they're very common, and it's very much about like that kind of fanaticism, and there's kind of like a fanaticism that plays a big role in that. But Myrmidia is much more about like thinking and planning things out, and um knowledge and knowledge, you know, that should have a bookcase behind me. But, you know, like knowledge and the idea of being able to learn and use like tactics is very interesting to me. And it's kind of funny that I'm talking about all this when I'm like sitting right here in a, oh, he gave me a thumbs up, thank you, when I'm sitting right here in a big old, I wait, you know what, I should see, can I just want to see thumbs up, cheer, there, I will cheer for him. Very cool. But it's very interesting to kind of see that, because a lot of the elements you see in Warhammer are much more smash first, ask questions later. Or there's a lot of that. There's like Khorne, and obviously the orcs, and you have a certain element of that with Ulrich, and you also have a certain element of that to a lot of Sigmar cults and things like that. But to have this goddess that's really much more about, you know, like understanding and like taking a step back, I just personally find that very interesting. And you know, you really look into all this, and it's just like I find the idea of this is like a group within Warhammer that defies a lot of the expectations. Like Myrmidia defies a lot of the expectations. For instance, like, you know, witch hunters, you could argue, are in a sense trying to protect people and trying to go out for quote unquote justice, but it's much more particularly about persecuting and stopping like monsters and things like that. Oh man, I'm just going to click that so I don't have to read people talk about either being mentally ill. That's silly. But anyway, um, you know, and it's about like the pursuit of wisdom and becoming better. And I really think that that's part of what makes that so interesting to me in a Warhammer setting, is that so much about the Warhammer setting is about like ignorance and smashing and things like that. The witch hunters are like they're out to like hunt down monsters and things like that, and yeah, that's needed to a certain extent, but they also often do things that are like really screwed up and stuff like that. But what I personally find so nice about this is that you have these clerics who really want to study, and they really want science, and they really want to push things forward, and they want to get people to improve and do the right thing, and they want to like set these orders of knights that are dedicated to that same thing, you know. And you have like the Knights of the Blazing Sun, and like their whole credo is doing stuff like that. And I also, kind of a side note, but I love the image of like the sun. I've always really liked solar deities. I guess I've always liked them, but ever since I played the first Dark Souls, I got even more into just solar deities as an idea. Like the idea of like this bright sunlight that could either be illumination or, you know, righteous fury burning away the bad stuff. And you have her set apart, and the classical gods in general are kind of set apart from the rest of Warhammer, which is, are not necessarily all of the rest of Warhammer, but a lot of the rest of Warhammer, which is, like I said, much more kind of over the top. There's this element of sanity in here, which you don't really see too much with other Warhammer gods, and it kind of makes you wonder, um, why it's possible that this goddess, it just has in the series in general of like gods and stuff in the Empire, if part of the reason is actually like to kind of counterbalance some of the crazier stuff you hear about from like other people and things like that. And like the Sigmar cult is, there's a lot of good, and there's a lot of good things about Sigmar, but there's also a lot of fanaticism, so it's kind of like really refreshing to have this other thing going on here. And I also find the idea of just war kind of It's interesting because I think that you can have just war, and I was going to bring up a couple of verses from other things here. Um, Fight for the sake of duty, treating alike happiness and distress, loss and gain, victory and defeat. Fulfilling your responsibility in this way, you will never incur sin. And that's from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 38. Um, we also have, there is like a concept, for instance, in Sikhism of a just war or Dhamma Yud. I think it's Yud. I think that's how you say that, meaning war in the defense of righteousness. Like such a war, it's not allowed to be motivated. The motive must not be revenge or enmity. The army must not include mercenaries. The army must be disciplined. Only a minimum force needed for success should be used. Civilians must not be harmed. There must be no looting. Territory must not be annexed. Property taken must be returned. And there's one last thing here from Guru Gobind Singh, who is a very prominent guru, one of the prominent gurus in the Sikh lineage. When all efforts to restore peace prove useless and no words avail, lawful as the flash of steel, it is right to draw the sword. I think one of the things that's very interesting, especially like in a world like Warhammer and our world as well, is that there are times when words just, if you're talking about like larger political entities, and like sometimes you need to stand up to defend things, and I just really like that attitude, especially like something placed like that within Warhammer. And sometimes I take my own ideas of like Sikhism and like Krishna talks a little bit about war in the Bhagavad Gita and stuff like that, and I take that and kind of apply it into my ideas of like Yamina, and I apply it onto my ideas of like people who work for Myrmidia a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. She's a very, very cool goddess, and you can really, really see that I think a decent amount of thought was put into her and like put into why she's here in this setting. And I mean, and it is true that in a lot of ways she is very much, um, Athena, or very similar to Athena in a lot of ways. But she also has her own character, and I think that it's also interesting because you can really see like this like big strong goddess lady, and that's just neat. There's just so many neat things about her, and I just kind of want to talk about her for a little bit. She's really, really cool, but she's mostly worshipped in the South. She has some presence in the Empire, but not as much as Sigmar, obviously. And yeah, she's like one of my favorite goddesses. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed my little babble about this lady and how cool she was and all that fun stuff. Thanks for watching me waddle around this camp while talking. Oh, wow, that's a healer? What's in your brew, sir? That doesn't look too good to me. Pointing my finger. All right, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and yeah, praise Myrmidia, and also, Jay McCallie, all that fun stuff. All right, bye bye.